Right. So let's get going. I'll just briefly introduce Kathy, our special guest today. So thank you so much for joining us, Kathy. Kathy is the Open Data Manager for Washington State. So she has a very, very robust background in a lot of different public sector roles where she has a lot of experience with data collection and now advises, correct me if I'm wrong, Kathy, advises many of the people in Washington State on sort of how to effectively use open data, how to publish open data, and the concerns and sort of considerations that you need to take before publishing data sets openly. And in her spare time, she loves to play the oboe. So over to you, Kathy. Well, actually, no, let me briefly go to our next page. This webinar is going to be recorded. It's going to be shared via social media, just so you know. And also our email newsletter. We're going to archive it on the ODI website and our YouTube channel. So we might use quotes and extracts just from this recording in future ODI communications. And we will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions for Kathy, or if you have any queries for us at the ODI, please feel free to put those in the chat. We also do have a Q&A box that we'll be keeping an eye on. So I introduced Kathy already. My name is Kay. I am a senior learning specialist at the ODI and also do data ethics consulting. So I often will deliver most of the data ethics professionals courses. If anybody's interested in signing up, that would be great. We'll give you links at the end. And this is how I know Kathy, because she is one of our DEP alumni, as well as having lots of other sort of data experience. So that now is over to Kathy. So I shall stop sharing my screen and we'll give it over to you, Kathy, to tell us all about future-proofing demographic data collection.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction, Kay. And it's such an honor to be here today, to have been invited. So I really appreciate that and look forward to sharing with you all today. So hi, I'm Kathy Greenwood. I'm the State of Washington's Open Data Program Manager. And like Kay said, I'm a certified data ethics professional through the Open Data Institute. I'm also a certified data management professional. And as the Open Data Program Manager, I advise agencies in the state of Washington, that's on the far west side of the United States. I advise agencies on how to make data open. And a big consideration in making that data open is the ethics of making it open and how we handle privacy for the people that data is about. So, what is data ethics? It's the realm of the law. So there's law saying that we have to do things, and so it's ethical to follow the law, but ethics includes many other things that are just the right thing to do. There is a sliver of law there that is outside of ethical responsibility, and that's where we need to ethically do something to change the law. But things become law once ethics need help to be followed, so it becomes law to encourage that to happen. But that's just in general my theory of data ethics. So what's new? Why do we talk about this now? There's not really a lot that's new. People have been publishing information about how to handle data ethically for a very long time, especially when back in 1973, where we started having large data stores at businesses, where the data analysts found that, oh, I can combine all of this information together and find out all of this information about people that I've never seen face to face. And that raised concerns for them about what could be done with that data. And doesn't that sound kind of similar to right now, where we're looking at large data and we're able to scrape data and find all this data about people? So this HEW report from 1973, it's the basis of all of the guidance around data from that date, and it's a fascinating read. I highly recommend looking at it. It reads like it was written yesterday, except for some terminology that's a little different. strong recommendations in there about how to handle data ethically. And the thing is that before we had everything happening in computers and people are filling out forms and then somebody's just looking at dozens of forms, transactions were face to face. You saw the person and you saw that they were a person, and you were able to ethically handle the situation because you're dealing person to person. The more distance that there is between the person looking at the data and the human that the data is about, the harder it is to treat them ethically, to remember how they might be impacted, to consider those impacts. So the Hugh report has a bunch of recommendations in it. Then the Belmont report from 1979, it's about using data principles to guide everything, and has tons more recommendations in it. Also highly recommend reading that. So there's not a whole lot that's new, and history repeats. So again, nothing terribly new, just things keep happening. We have new technologies coming out. We have political division, there's war and unrest, there's things happening to businesses, and all of these situations when these events happen, we look at the data that we have and may consider using it for purposes that aren't why it was collected. We collected all of this data about citizens across a population, and some questions might come up about what to do with that data. Businesses collect demographic data about the people that they serve, and let's say they face some financial turmoil, and like, oh, well, that data set, that's worth money, we can sell that and just get a little carriage over time. So things happen that bring up questions about how we're going to use our data. So what does future-proofing your data ethics mean? When we collect data from people, we tell them what we're going to use that data for, hopefully. We have a purpose for collecting that data, and we use it for what we said, hopefully. And then a change happens. So we get that new leadership, or we get into a war, or there's financial turbulence going on. And after that change, you have new ethics. But we collected that data under the old ethics, under the prior ethics. So how do we keep the promise that we were only going to use the data for the reason that we collected it for then? Well, the time to set your data ethics, the time to employ to figure out how you're going to protect it, to figure out how you're going to keep that promise, is before the change happens. So there are unimaginable changes in the future. There are things that we have no idea what's going to happen. We don't know who's going to ask for our data, who's going to have access to our systems because they broke into them, or what kind of, or if our business is going to be sold. We have no idea what's going to happen in the future. We have to figure out how we're going to protect our data now, so that when that future event happens, we already have our data practices in place, and those survive the change. Okay, so why do we collect demographic data? And that's because today's talk is focused on collecting demographic data to measure service equity. So that's the narrow focus of this research that I did, that I found would actually be more of a book than just a short paper. So you'll find that I hit several things very lightly in this talk because there's only so much time. So why do we collect demographic data? It's because we want to discover if we are discriminating against anyone. We want to see, are people of a certain age range getting a lesser quality of service than people in other age ranges? Are people of a particular race or ethnic background or a different primary language, are they getting a lesser service than other people? So we need data to figure that out, so that's why we collect it. when you're collecting data for equity of your service, or when you make that decision that you want to measure whether service is being delivered equitably, and when you make decisions about how you're going to protect that data, it all needs to be aligned with your organizational mission. So it makes sense to say, well, we just want to do it. We just want to collect data because it's the right thing to do. But if we look back in the past, 2019, a lot of organizations came out with statements in support of diversity, supporting DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. They came out with these statements. They hired people to work in equity positions. And now we can look at those organizations and see how that has fallen away. It has not survived. To keep it right, to be doing the right thing, you have to align your equity practices with your organizational mission. Everything anyone in an organization does must support the mission, or the organization shouldn't be spending money or resources on it. It's the right thing to do, ought to be good enough, but we find again and again that it's not. It's necessary to demonstrate that equity is good for business, and it is. So you must, and you absolutely can, show critical mission alignment. So this is an example where, let's say we have an organization that has the mission of providing safe food services. So they spend a lot of time figuring out, well, what's the best way to do that? What's the best way to provide safe food service? Well, what we're going to do is train people on how to provide food safely, and we're going to give licenses to the people who've been through our training. And so now they've got data about the people that they've done training with. So they make decisions like, oh, we're gonna sell our trainee data to marketers, or we're gonna publish the trainees' personal information. When someone finds out that can be happening to their data, they might not feel safe sharing their personal information. And if sharing that personal information is a requirement for participating in the training, then they don't sign up, which works against the mission of the organization. You can't help people who don't sign up for the training and get licensed. So if your data practices are keeping people from signing up, then you're working against yourself. So showing that alignment, that making decisions about, well, we're not going to collect people's demographic information, or we're not going to publish their demographic information when we make a list of the certified people. Making those decisions aligns with your mission. So when you document that, now you're aligning your mission with equity. So hope that was a helpful example of how to align with your organization's mission. So demographic data includes a lot of information, people's gender, what their educational background is, their ethnicity, their income, race, whether or not they're citizens. So quite a lot of information that is personal. So this information is personal to me. It's my right to share when I want to share it. It's not someone else's right to share on my part. So what is data misuse? How do you, because when you collect data, you collect it to use it for a certain purpose. So how do you decide what means it's being misused? Well, the easy definition is that it goes against the law. So if you collect data and you use it in a way that breaks the law, obviously that's misuse. The next thing is that you're violating your agency or your organization's privacy principles. If you don't have privacy principles, then you can't be violating. But if you do, following those privacy principles is a way to make sure you're not misusing your data. And in general, it's using it for a purpose that isn't why it was collected. So if I'm giving you my personal data because you said you were going to use it for just this one purpose, I'm insulted, I feel endangered, it makes me lose trust in you if you use my data for a reason that doesn't align with what I agreed, the under the parameters for which I agreed to share that data with you. So how do we make sure data isn't misused? These are just a few examples. For one thing, there's the Open Data Institute's Data Ethics Canvas. This is a large canvas of questions that you go through, and it walks you through the whole thought process of figuring out, well, what data do we need? Where are we going to get it from? What are all the laws and policies that protect this data or require collecting it, or what's everything that is around this data? And then it asks you to think about what are all of the positive impacts that you expect to get from collecting this, and what are all the potential risks to people because you're collecting this. And then it has you go even further. What are you going to do to make sure that those positive outcomes happen? And what are you going to do to reduce the risks? And how are you going to communicate all of that with the people that the data is about? And it's a living document. It's something that you keep revisiting throughout your project to make sure that you're following it and to make updates to it as you go along. So the Data Ethics Canvas is a wonderful tool. If you have laws, or if you can get a law put in place to explicitly protect the data that you're collecting, that is the very best protection for data. So trying to get a law in place to protect data that you have now before some change happens in the future, that is going to really help protect that data. So privacy principles while you're waiting for a law, establishing privacy principles and making those part of your organization's culture is another great thing to do. The state of Washington has a wonderful list of privacy principles that all grow out of the documentation that I shared earlier, the Hugh report and the Belmont report. We boil it down really well, I think, to something that people can use. So just to briefly share some of them, it's to only collect the data that you need. So every single piece of information that you're asking from people, you take a look at that and say, well, why are we asking for that? Do we actually need it? Are we going to use it? Researchers, we love, give me all the data. Please, if we can ask for it, I want it, because I'm going to be able to discover things by looking at that data. When you're talking about people's data, people's personal information, you can't have that philosophy. Only collect what you know you need in order to provide the service or to do the analysis that you need. So explicitly define why you need stuff. So that's one, and we call that data minimization. So you're only collecting the data that you need. And another strong part of that is to only use the data for the reason for which it was collected. And I went over that a little bit earlier. And there are more, like following the law, that's a principle. And having strong data governance across your organization is another great way to protect your data. You want to know where your data is, what systems is it in, how does it get from one place to another, what data leaves your organization, and who can access that data and when. So you want to have strong data governance, because if you don't know where your data is, if you don't know who can access it, if you don't know that all the data from this system is regularly pulled and given to someone else, and then you decide to put new data in that system, um, you have to be governing your data so you know what's changing and you're protecting that data as you go along. And that's just 4 things. There are tons of other things. I can't even fit them all on this slide. Um, so meaningful informed consent, I can share a little bit more about that. So when you download a piece of software or you visit a website and it brings up this use agreement, and your only option is to say yes. Like, if I want to use this page, if I want to see this article that I went to this website to look at, if I want to use this software and I don't really have other options, I have to just hit accept. That is not meaningful informed consent. If it's not allowing me to say no at any point along the way, it's not meaningful. So allowing people to say no, informing them of the risks, informing them of the intended benefits, and also getting their input on what they want to see happen. Like, you're sharing with someone, like you're talking to a family member or a relative or a neighbor, and you're like, I want to do this thing, and it's going to be helpful if I can have this information from you. And you have a back and forth with them about it. Let them have a say in what you collect and how you work with it. So then there's a lot more here, being transparent about what you do. One thing I don't have on here is that when you collect people's data, you're putting them at risk. So use the data. If you're going to go to the effort of asking people to put themselves at risk by giving you their data, honor that by actually using it. Don't collect it just because you might use it. Don't collect it because in the future you're going to have a process where you work with it. Use it, and then get rid of it. So you're collecting their personal information, and you want to keep their personal information for as short a time as you can. Because if you don't have it and somebody demands it, you don't have it. You can't give it to them if you don't have it. So definitely use the data, keep it for as short a time as possible. Okay, and I have tons more I could say. So feel free to reach out to me if you have more questions after this webinar. So I'm Kathy.Greenwood@watech.wa.gov. Yeah, so thank you. I really appreciate having the time to talk with you all today. Thank you for having me here, Kay.
Thank you so much, Kathy. That was really a great overview and so insightful. I'm wondering, I'm like full of questions now for you. I'm wondering if we could go back a slide actually, because there were a few things on there. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one here. Where, like you mentioned, third-party data collection. I'm intrigued by that. So in terms of, say, future-proofing demographic data collection, so ensuring that, you can keep that promise that you're making about what the data is going to be used for. How do you see third-party data collection playing a role in that?
Yeah. So if your organization, if you feel that your organization has limited control over its ability to protect data in the future, finding a third party that you believe has more control over protecting that data is going to be a great partner to work with. You'll want to be sure that they have a history of protecting information, of saying no when someone asks for that data. And it may very well be the community that you want to collect data about. And the relationship with that organization might be such that you're not actually getting data from them. They're the ones collecting the data, they're analyzing it, and they're giving you the results. So you need to have trust. There needs to be mutual trust there, that you can trust that what they tell you is the true analysis and is actually the information that you need in order to provide better services. And they need to trust you well enough that if they're honest with you, that you're gonna use that information appropriately. So often it might be the actual group that you need to collect information about, and you can't be demanding data from them. And you're just trusting that when somebody tells you that something that you did caused them harm, you're like, oh, okay, so that caused you harm. How do we make that better? I'm sorry that that happened. How do we do it differently so it doesn't cause harm in the future?
That's a key step, that last one. That's a really interesting point. And I'm interested as well to hear your thoughts on data sovereignty, because I suppose that's sort of related, isn't it? Um,
Yes. Yeah, it's very much related to data sovereignty.
do you
So
do
there's
that in Washington State? Like, do you sort of work with like sort of a data sovereignty kind of mindset around some of the stuff that you do?
um it hasn't come up with anything that I directly do yet, but it is part of many conversations that I'm part of. So there's been a long history of people collecting data or getting information from groups of people and then saying that I discovered this, I um, found this out, and it's telling stories that don't belong to you. So instead of giving a voice to the people that you're meeting with, and letting it be their decision whether to share this information and where to share it, it's sharing on someone else's behalf without their permission. So data sovereignty is honoring the groups that you're collecting information about, giving them power in making decisions about what information is needed and how it will be used, and giving them a say in how they can benefit from it and what risks they want to to suffer or to mitigate.
I've heard a really interesting example of um, sort of wanting to collect demographic data for equality monitoring purposes and basically asking sort of indigenous groups to be the data collectors and then be the data aggregators and then reporting that data in aggregate to sort of the, whatever government authorities, where they can just report in aggregate. So if they're trying to monitor for equality's impact, it's easier to see sort of what percentage of different ethnic groups are doing what, when it's aggregated anyway, rather than passing across those individual records. So I think that's a really interesting way for organizations to think about, like, can we, we're collecting this really risky data, or this is something that we know is going to potentially put these people at risk of discrimination in future if somebody gets hold of it. So maybe we can actually not link the properties we're interested in to their individual records, but can we collect it in a way that's aggregated? Individuals can't be identified, and not only that, we don't even own it. We're just getting the data from somebody else, like a third party collector, or from the people that the data is about who've collected it themselves. I think that's really quite like, would you say that that falls into your sort of philosophy of future proofing?
Absolutely, absolutely. And to take that a little farther, is My organization decides that this is going to be risky for these people in this way. I can't make the decision for them about whether they take on that risk. There's been research of populations where the organization collecting the data didn't want to share because it was too small of a number of people and it was going to identify who people were, if they were providing just that much. But they talked to the people that the data was about, explained that risk to them, and they said, no, I want people like me to be seen.
Mm.
So do publish my data. It was their choice to do that. So I can't make that decision on someone else's behalf. I need to talk to them, explain what I see the risks are, listen to them and any additional risks that they know about, and let that be their decision in as much as it's possible.
Yeah, that's
Emmanuel Levinas is a philosopher whose work I think is fascinating and works with that. So Emmanuel Levinas says to view people as other. And I know that a lot of people are out there going, oh, wait, whoa, we're not supposed to other people. But his meaning in that is in saying, I don't need to make people, assimilate people into my culture. I don't put my values on other people. They are full and entire beings, full and entire people, humans, who have their own thoughts and their own values and their own ways of being, and I need to honor that in what I do. So I'm treating them as another person. They don't have to be like me or think like me, and they're not less than me because they don't think the same way that I do. They don't need to become more mature in their thinking processes to be like me. They are fully human and capable of making these decisions. And Emmanuel Levinas takes it a little bit further than that and says that the researcher, the person collecting this information, the person holding the information, has an unending responsibility to the people whose data they're collecting to make sure that they're getting the benefits and any harms that they suffer because I collected their information. I have a responsibility to those people for that. And it's unending, it's perpetual. So that any organization that has information about people, they have a perpetual responsibility to those people. So
that's a really interesting way to look at it. It's an interesting way to think about decolonizing data collection, really, is sort of the vibes I'm getting from that. It actually was making me sort of flash back to your slide where you were talking about the sort of trying to make it culture. So making those privacy principles culture. We do a lot of work at the ODI where we think about, how can people, because I work in the training sort of branch of the company, we do a lot of work thinking about how can we get, different people on board. Do you think that culture needs to come from like the C-suite or like the top of the organization? Do you think it needs to be built from the bottom up? Any thoughts on how to sort of like get everybody on board with these ideas? Because I think one of the things I see a lot is organizations that are sort of less mature around data collection and data sharing are often just like, are we compliant with the law? Are we compliant? Right. Good. Done. We're ethical. And as you point out, there's like that is not, there's just a smaller circle of law and like a larger circle of ethics. So how do you think you bring on that culture of sort of thinking about these things?
yeah. So stories, having stories about people who are harmed by the way that your organization has used their data. So if your organization has been around long enough, those stories exist.
Mm-hmm.
If your organization is pretty new, then you need to get stories from other organizations to share. Sharing those stories with people so that when they are in the midst of collecting information or printing information or whatever they're or deciding to share information with somebody else, they have that, oh wait, isn't this what caused that harm?
Mm,
So stories so that they see the person. Again, we're dealing with that distance between the people that we're collecting the data about and ourselves. So help them see the people by telling the stories about the people. Another piece is yes, it's at all levels. So from the C-suite all the way like to the frontline people. Get people talking about what principles they're following when they're doing something. Like, oh, well, we're not going to do that because of our privacy principle to only use data for what it's collected for. So have the executives talking about that every time they're presenting, and when the frontline staff are making decisions or sharing something, ask them, so does that relate to this privacy principle? So just talking about the privacy principles, it makes them be alive, and then showing that you make decisions based on privacy principles, that that makes it become part of the culture so that people are it's coming to mind, it's part of what they're doing.
mm. Yeah, and that in a way, those principles are so important, aren't they? That like having those agreed upon published principles, because that helps an organization decide, the bit that you were saying about does this support the mission? Does this undermine the mission? Because I think different people within an organization sometimes will have different priorities. Somebody might be thinking about the bottom line, as you say, your example of a business where they're like, oh, like hard times, can we sell some data? And, they may feel this is like supporting our organizational principles because like our organization will fold and we won't even be able to pay people's salaries if we don't sell this data. And then somebody else is like, but that's not what we stand for. Um, do you think, like, what do you think is the best way for an organization to kind of hash out those discussions and like sort of check that the stuff that they're doing is undermining? Like, who decides what's undermining and what's not undermining?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So leadership has to be part of making that decision of what follows the mission. Often, I think the people who instigate that conversation are not the people at leadership. So being able to share the story with leadership. So someone who can tell the story of so and so did this with their data and this is how it impacted someone, sharing that story with leadership so they understand that how it affects the mission. Hopefully that helps them adopt it and put a, let people make that decision. But so for me, in my experience, organizations have a strategic mission. So you have your mission, you have your vision, you have your goals, you have your objectives, and then everything that you do, you align to that. So even if you're at the front end, you're able to look at that strategic mission and you're saying, this ethical practice aligns with this strategic objective. And so you're able to tie the decision together, and it just has more weight when you're linking it to that strategic mission, as long as the organization isn't as long as the organization is making the strategic mission because they actually follow it, their strategic plan because they actually follow it. There are some who just sometimes it's not something that they've made be part of the culture. But that's a place to start.
Hmm. I see Katie in the chat has just sort of reinforced what you said there. She said, I was going to suggest that sharing real life experiences of when data handling has gone right or wrong makes enforcing a culture of treating data appropriately more personally relatable.
Yeah,
Really true.
absolutely.
Reflecting that handling data ultimately impacts people in their lives should make one evaluate their behaviors and hopefully make more positive changes. Yeah, totally echoing your point. Um, one that's changing tack slightly. I wanted to address a point that we talk about a lot at the ODI, which is for anybody who's ever been on like one of our training courses, there's one of our most favorite sort of screenshots that we show is one about car insurance. And we talk about like, okay, what data is like sensible to collect when you're trying to develop a car insurance quote for somebody? What data feels a little bit unfair? There's always a little bit of, you know, ethical debate about certain things. So I'll give an example of things that people are often on two sides of is should teenage boys pay more than teenage girls for car insurance? And some people will be like, the statistics are there. They get in more car accidents. And then some people will be like, yeah, but gender is a protected characteristic. And so we sort of hash out these things. As you say, the law is often sort of a guide there. So ultimately that did happen in the UK where the law sort of provided some clarity on that point. But then our sort of next slide that we would show is my colleague Dave did a screenshot of where he collected two quotes. The first one from someone called John, the second one from someone called Mohammed. And the car insurance quote was 3 times as much for Mohammed. And he did this because it was in the news, and it sort of continues to be an ongoing challenge that certain names seem to attract a much higher insurance premium. And of course, the car insurance companies at the time were like, we don't discriminate on the basis of religion. And technically, no, they do not have a data field that says religion equals Muslim because, you know, we can't say for sure that Muhammad's a Muslim, and they haven't collected that. But obviously, the name is such a strong proxy for that, that if you are discriminating on the basis of a name, which is not necessarily a protected characteristic, you are still discriminating against certain ethnic groups. So I wonder if you have any like sort of thoughts or advice for organizations on how they could potentially look at the data that they have and think about whether there might be any proxies that could be used for discrimination.
Yeah. So start out by looking at your agency's mission in this one. So if your mission is safe driving, which I hope is an insurance company's mission. Like going back to just the gender part of the discussion, does it serve the mission to charge more for boys to be insured, and or does the price become a hardship so now they're driving uninsured? So does it actually work against your mission to charge more? Even in that case, even if your mission is making money, you're not getting the money because they're not giving you the money. So that's one place to look at tying it to your strategic mission. And then inferring, like in general, inferring data that you didn't ask for is problematic in that you're not going to get the right information. So look at your goals, and if there's a right way to collect that information, then do. But yeah, I have a hard time thinking how how anyone would think that religion affects driving. So
Exactly.
yeah.
What's really interesting about that is they then went on to sort of, I think I saw this in the news maybe 6 months ago or so, that, you know, people will often think, well, this isn't like, I'm not Muhammad, like my name's not Muhammad, this doesn't affect me. But in the news, it actually showed that somebody had done some analysis on this and found that postcodes that were more ethnically diverse actually then also all paid more, even if all other factors were the same. So things like poverty, crime rates, and things were, even if they were all the same, that Muhammad effect sort of rippled out to everybody who lived in the neighborhood. And it just goes to show, doesn't it, that if the discrimination is happening against one group, you know, it probably affects everybody. You know, we're all living in the world. This ripples out to all the rest of us. So even if it isn't your group that's at risk, it could be anyone's. So
Right.
I've seen some really interesting guidance from the Equality and Human Rights Commission where they had a list of sort of data types that could potentially be used to infer sensitive characteristics. So things that you maybe wouldn't think about, like what if a government's collecting information about what benefits somebody's been on, well, you might not think that that would necessarily infer something like gender, but actually, if they've had a maternity benefit, then it could be inferred. So um, definitely would I would definitely encourage organizations to think about what sensitive characteristics they think could be inferred, even if they think they've kind of cleansed their data set of the really sensitive stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true. Yeah. So like the practice of inferring, don't do it.
Yeah.
Um, and yes, that is something that we have to think about with open data is if we make this characteristic public, like all by itself, maybe it's okay, but what else could someone do with it? What are the potential risks of making this information available to the public? What could someone infer from it or do to cause harm to the person who's providing it?
Absolutely. In fact, this leads me to think about just giving a little plug for one of our tools at the ODI, which is the data sharing risk assessment. So I'll put the thing in the chat. Oops, it's going to autocorrect. So this is actually a tool. You have to make a login for our website if anybody wants to have a go at it. But you can essentially risk assess a data set for sharing, and it walks you through a lot of these questions like who's this going to impact and how, and gives people a chance to, sort of guides you with a framework of how to mitigate those things with some suggestions. So if you're a member, if anybody becomes an ODI member, they can do an unlimited number of risk assessments on that tool. So little plug. Right. So on that note, I think if we can swap back to our slide deck. Joe, I know you're there in the background. Are you able to potentially share the slide deck? Because I've lost my window whilst chatting. Perhaps I can. So I want to share with you all, we've got a really exciting lineup of data ethics professionals webinars coming up in the next couple of months. So we've tried to get a pretty diverse list of webinars. Joe, if you wouldn't mind going, I think it's slide 5. Sorry, put you on the spot. So our next one is going to be Angela, no, that's not true. Una Murphy from the Arts Council of England, and she's going to be doing one on sort of AI governance in sort of the arts sector. Oh, there we go. Oh no, it's Angela. It is Angela. I was right. So Angela Shopke Gonzalez is going to be doing one on data ethics and smart city technologies. So that will be on the 22nd of May. If anybody wants to book, we've got our QR code there for the next webinar. Following that, we've got Una, who's doing AI policy for Arts Council in England. And then we've got Nadine Damashk from GIZ, the German sort of global development agency, looking at how they do AI governance in a global development context. So I have a feeling that she'll have quite a lot of overlap with what Kathy's spoken about, because obviously there's a lot of considerations there around how people's data is used, especially when you have a bit of a power imbalance in terms of the like data collection versus the data sort of the people that the data is about. So please feel free to sign up for our newsletter if you would like to get notified about upcoming webinars. We'd love to do that. I know we've got quite a lot of alumni in the audience, so please do get in touch with me if you would like to present one of these. We'd love to have you. I think we're lined up. We've got one in the works for September as well, but November onwards is free if anybody's interested. And what else did I want to say? Oh, one more thing. Kathy was talking about the data ethics canvas, which Joe shared a link to in the chat here. If anybody has used if anybody's used the data ethics canvas in their workplace, we're actually, one of our researchers, Sophia Worth, is conducting some research on how the data ethics canvas sort of helps guide these kinds of decisions. So please reach out to me if you would like to if you'd like to talk to Sophia, or I see Joe's just put her email in the chat there. I know Sophia would love to hear from you if you've used the data ethics canvas, and you could really help support our research about that in the ODI. And one more thing, we are starting our next cohort of data ethics professionals if you'd like to become certified, if you're not. So that starts on the 20th of May. And we are, Joe's just put the link in. So we actually are having a spring sale. We often find that the May cohort is on the smaller side because of the fact that it's like the beginning of the financial year and everybody booked onto the previous course. So we'd love to get a nice full group for that, hence why we're on a spring sale. If you would like to sign up for it, that's fantastic. I'm going to actually put I realized I can't actually type in here. I only can type. I can only put messages to like the host and panelists. So May 15 is our discount code if you want 15% off. So you get the exclusive because you're here for the webinar. The data sharing risk assessment, I saw that LinkedIn post, that is, it's just the letters like DSRA, data sharing risk assessment.theodi.org. So we'll give you a chance to have a play with that. So on that note, I just want to say another huge thank you to Kathy. We love hearing about this, especially happy that you could join us at such an early hour for yourself. And I think we can all agree that the stuff that you talked about is so important, especially the bits about deleting quickly and making sure that others hold the data if at all possible. So really appreciate that. One big round of applause for Kathy. Thank you so much to you, and thank you so much to everyone else for joining us. And I cannot wait to see you for our next webinar.
Thank you so much, Kay, and thank you everybody for coming. It's been a great experience.
Thanks.